So, hi everyone. I'm Bree. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, I like data, but not so much in presentations because I want to connect with my audience. So, what I did for this presentation is I actually put together a few slides about one of the incidents that happened recently this quarter with my division. And I wanted to kind of break that down and show you how Taproot helped us identify where we were deficient at. So I have a question before we start. How many of you go to work thinking that that will be your last day? Why is that? Okay. Is it safe to say because you trust that your employer is going to keep you safe? So? What about when if you're ever on a job site and you have to write a permit? What is something that we say out in the field? Trust, but verify. So that is what this incident is going to show that did not happen. Is it this one? There we go. So here's just a summary of it. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically we were remodeling one of our buildings out in Pennsylvania. A lot of contractors on site, upwards of like 100 people. Now that may not be a lot to you, but it is a lot for us because we don't operate like that. We normally have the same 25, 30 people on site every single day. So having all those extra bodies and eyes on site is probably difficult when you're only used to the certain amount of people. This project has been going on since the beginning of COVID. So that is how long this process has started. They were writing permits back then. They were doing demolition back then. And this particular incident, you'll see in a couple slides following that 2 months before this incident happened is when they actually first written out that first permit, and they just kind of went off that permit and it wasn't a new one. So in every Taproot situation that we have, I've shared this with some of y'all. I'm involved in every single Taproot that my division has. And like Klaus and Renee was saying, you have to have the right team. So we actually have our operations leaded, but I'm there to facilitate. I'm just a tool. I'm there to dig a little bit deeper. I'm there to probe their brains. Are you asking the right questions? You know, can we interview this associate? So as you can see, live lines were identified above the shed prior to demo work with red ribbon. So how they identified any line that was live, they tied some red danger tape on there. Going to paint that picture for you. This shed was removed. They did this 2 months prior. The Lotto device fell off. Anyone want to take a guess on why this Lotto device fell off? Nope. Wrong size. It did not fit the valve that it was intended to fit. An HWP was issued for the demolition for that day. It was hot work to demo the piping above where the shed was. The HWP did not identify that the lockout tagout device was required. So they didn't even mention Lotto on the device. And we have that clearly on our permit process. The pressurized section of the line was not identified with red ribbon prior to work. Why? The shed was removed 2 months ago. The piping line was not walked down during the permitting process. This means that this person that wrote the permit did an armchair permit. You familiar with that language? Is that acceptable? That is the opportunity to open them up with our competitors. That is what I like to say. So, of course, we had a contractor cut the high pressure nitrogen line. Now, the good thing that came out of that, it was a 22-year-old associate. He noticed the sparks stopped at a certain point. That means that he was trained well to do his job. Had he not, he could have lost his life that day. The contractor immediately stopped the demolition. He contacted the project manager about the gas leak. They recognized that the line had been cut, a live line. A timeout was called. We too used the timeout situation and language. The project manager investigated the cut line that it was made on the wrong side of the isolation valve. Why? This fell off. This was moved 2 months ago. The line was not walked out. This is everything that Taproot helped us find. These questions weren't asked. These people were just, they're probably writing 30 permits a day. That's a lot. Doesn't matter how many permits you're writing a day, you have to treat each permit as if it's the first time and the first one that you're writing. So the Lotto device was missing. The Lotto device, the correct size was not used, like I mentioned earlier. The project manager notified maintenance and the plant management. Then I was notified in engineering as well. So when we do our Taproot, we also involve the engineering department, maintenance, the affected associates, their manager, plant management, VP of operations. Sometimes our president will get involved as well. And when you have that many people and that level of eyes, people tend to take it serious. So maintenance went out, they stopped the flow of the bulk tank, and that is how we ended that. But I was not satisfied with this because of a couple things. Why was the wrong lockout tagout device used? Why couldn't we take 5 minutes to say, hey, we need new equipment? This isn't gonna work. Why was this permit not walked out? So we had to have a meeting with those contractors to say, hey, by a show of hands, who came to work to die today? No one raised their hand. But I said, please raise your hand because you trusted her to write this permit without verifying. I said, had this young man not known his job, we would be in a very different situation. And they were like, oh yeah, trust me, but verify. That's all you can do. So 2 months prior to the demolition, the clamshell lock had been placed on the isolation valve and it was vented 2 months ago. That's too far out. Even if you do the work 2 months prior, you should probably follow up with that a day or two before you actually do the work. The HWP was issued that morning along with other HWPs, but that portion of the N2 line was not walked out. It was under the assumption that one, the red ribbon was still there and the lockout tagout device was still there. When we spoke to the project manager who wrote the permit, she was like, Bree, I am so, you don't have to apologize. She's like, I just had so much going on. This isn't for blame. This is to find out why this happened so that we can stop this from repeating itself. So is there a red light on here somewhere? Is it here? Oop, oh, I don't know what I did. There we go. I don't know where the pointer, right here. You see how this red ribbon, this is where the red ribbon was, where the cut was to be made. Here, this is the shed. This was moved 2 months prior. How do you know which one of these lines it is? So what the associate saw, the contractor saw, was this empty space with no shed. So the pressurized lines were not identified with any red flagging. The wrong size LIDO device was used on into isolation, and the line was not physically walked down. These are all the things that Taproot helped us identify. And I wanted to share this with you because sometimes the simplest things will be the ones that get you. Walking out a permit is important. Having a conversation with your contractor is important. Verifying contractor training is important. So, because again, his training is what saved him and us for liability for, all intents and purposes. So are there any questions over this incident that I shared with you all today? Anything that you would do differently? Anything that you think we could have done better? I think 6,000 PSI, enough to cause a lot of damage. So what happened is this project manager, she was retrained through our HWP process. We also gave her an assistant so that she's not writing all those permits by herself. And then also they have to use what we call now the buddy system. They have to have the person who writes the permit and a person from maintenance on site and the contractor walk out the line, all three of them. None were available because they had used them all. We have the capital to buy new ones. They just didn't. They just found what was available instead of taking an extra 5 minutes to say, let me order new equipment. Yep.
Overloaded, so, that then goes to, paying for, weights aside to help out.
And I think we could all agree that that never happens, that you get more people,
Right.
usually when you need them, that's why I was like, that was a. really
Yep.
correct.
Right, because, that's really, from what I've taken away, being here for the first time, digging deeper, so, long lockout backup issues, I can totally see that, but then, instead of stopping there and saying, all right, yep, we just need to get more. How do we go about making sure that there's always enough so that, it's easy to do, impossible to fail. So if you have enough, then they don't want it.
So what we did to mitigate that, to be specific, is we now mandate, figure out how many lockout tagouts you're going to have on the job, double the equipment. Now, if you run out of double, pick up the phone, use your P card, order more. So you're correct. You should have more available. This associate, she never really writes permits. This was her first or second actual project that she was over. So that has something to do with it as well. She's kind of soft-spoken. She's kind of timid in a sense. So she feared picking up the phone to ask for help because it would make her look bad. And I'm like, asking for help will never make you look bad. And so we worked with her on that as well. And I'm like, well, if you don't want to ask for help, just tell me and I'll volunteer them to give you what you need. And it's simple as that. Any more questions? No? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so the person that recognized that the spark stopped,
Mhm.
is there any recognition or any type of feedback?
So the company, my company, they thanked him, of course, but I actually just gave him a gift card, $100 gift card, because I appreciated his diligence for his job. So I just had to get clearance from my VP to say, hey, a thank you is great, a pat on the back is great, but I want to actually give him this, because what that's going to do is it's going to increase the morale within his coworkers to recognize when something is going wrong and make them work a little bit harder. Thank you.